Pacific Rim is a 2013 sci-fi action film directed by Guillermo del Toro about giant robots called Jaegers getting into fights with giant monsters called kaiju. The film was heavily inspired by Japanese monster and mecha films and anime such as Super Sentai and Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's cool as fuck. Today I don't want to talk about the action, instead I want to talk about the characters. One of the dramatic tools Pacific Rim uses to make itself distinct from other mecha media is what the film calls drifting, where each Jaeger requires two pilots who have had their minds linked and their emotions and thoughts shared as though they were one person. The plot explanation for this is that the robots are piloted by being linked to your brain, but because the robots are so big, you need two people who are drift compatible to be able to pilot them without permanently damaging your nervous system. The film never explicitly states what makes people drift compatible, but it implies that people who shared similar experiences and fighting skills are more likely to be drift compatible. The film has two central protagonists, a man named Raleigh Beckett and a woman named Mako Mori. Both are established to have suffered similar profound personal tragedies, with Raleigh having seen his brother killed by a kaiju and then forced to pilot a Jaeger to safety by himself, and Mako having witnessed her entire family's deaths when a kaiju attacked their home. The two of them also happen to be drift compatible, and throughout the film they grow closer as people and establish an intimate sense of respect and trust in one another. I think I can safely say that I wasn't the only one who was surprised when, at the end of the film, the two didn't end up kissing or establish any romantic connection in any way. In an interview, Charlie Hunnam, the actor who played Raleigh, commented that Pacific Rim was a love story without a love story. It's all about the necessary elements of love without arriving at love itself. I wanted to talk about this film because of this. Pacific Rim is one of the few examples that I can think of a film containing straight baiting. And this can help us explore some of the fundamental concepts around queer film theory. First, let's get a big definition out of the way. Queer theory is a framework used for analysis of many different things. Fundamentally, it centers around studying the presence or absence of queerness, which refers to gendered romantic and sexual acts or identities that exist outside of the societal norm. The societal norm, of course, being that everybody is cisgender and heterosexual. Queer film theory is analyzing the queer content within films, and particularly is interested in the fact that queer identities and acts have been notably and intentionally absent from film as a medium, due to societal norms and legal systems demanding their absence. See, films, as with all media, have their own kind of language that tends to make a lot of assumptions about the viewer's beliefs about the world. This includes a baseline belief in societal expectations, such as, for example, men and women are romantically and sexually attracted to each other, and everybody is cisgender and heterosexual unless explicitly stated otherwise, just as a few examples. These assumptions allow the film to sometimes make logical shortcuts so they don't need to devote time to establish or explain the meaning of certain things. This is used extremely often in films, to the point where it's almost always a given if there is one male protagonist and one female protagonist sharing screen time, they're probably going to end up together by the end of it. This is so prevalent, in fact, that oftentimes films just sometimes forget or neglect to give the characters any development or interactions that would imply them being attracted to each other until the moment where they're literally sucking face, because the film simply assumes that the viewers know the expectation that men and women are attracted to each other, so they don't even need to show it. Queer film theory is often intentionally critical of many of these assumptions, especially the idea that every character is straight and cis unless stated otherwise. Instead, queer film analysis looks at the ways in which characters explicitly interact and behave, and the ways these behaviors can be indicative of identity or attraction. Films often are created with the assumption that people have seen other films before, and they understand that some of the societal and social context in the film was created in, so they can then use a sort of visual shorthand to indicate certain concepts. Certain examples include a character coughing to indicate that they're sick, a character having slurred speech and bad balance to indicate that they're drunk, etc. And this extends to the ways in which characters in film interact with each other to convey relationships. Common ways characters can interact that can convey attraction include, but are not limited to, positive physical touches, especially with the hands, including hugs, accidental touches, etc., emotional connections, such as characters sharing deeply personal information, positive glances, smiles, laughing, making eye contact, expressions of devotion, self-sacrifice, expressing a desire to protect one another, putting extra effort into assisting somebody that they're attracted to, invitations to secret, important spaces to the character, literally having sex, explicitly stating attraction, and other obvious and blunt methods. One thing you may be noticing, seeing this list, is that almost all of these are actions that are not exclusive to sexual and romantic relationships. Many of these are simple visual indicators that show the characters care about one another. They can sometimes reasonably be interpreted as simply friendly rather than romantic. There is one single action that films consistently rely on to establish that the attraction is romantic, and I bet you know exactly what it is, but we'll get to that in a second. Back to Pacific Rim and straight baiting. So when I use the term straight baiting, it's because I see Pacific Rim as a heterosexual example of the phenomenon known as queer baiting. Queer baiting is a phenomenon where a piece of media portrays two characters of the same gender as having a relationship that contains many indicators that would imply or foreshadow a romantic connection or attraction, but the romantic connection between the two is never actually confirmed narratively. Instead, often in an attempt to skirt censorship laws, or because those involved are prejudiced against queer people but still want our money, these indicators are used in such a way that they could be interpreted to be purely platonic. A recent popular example of queerbaiting can be seen in the anime Skate the Infinity, where two protagonists, Reki and Longa, have a friendship that is so physically and emotionally intimate that the creators of the show simply had to have known what they were doing. But what makes either of these baiting? Even if their relationship isn't explicit, people can see how their relationship could be or is romantic. How much confirmation do we actually need to know that Reki and Longa are gay? The answer to that is that both Skate the Infinity and Pacific Rim both lack the single action that is used in film to establish and confirm romantic attraction: the kiss. Kissing, smooching, making out, sucking face. The kiss is the single action that separates the platonic from the romantic. It's the bar all fictional relationships must cross in order to be validated. It is the single greatest obstacle queer representation has to overcome in popular media. The kiss has been used in films to indicate romantic relationships and attraction for as long as films have existed. It is what the male and female leads of the film do at the end of the movie in nearly every movie ever that has both a male and female lead. And it is what forces queer films and queer film analysts to exist almost entirely in the realm of subtext and metaphor, and forces us to read deeper than the surface of a film to find queer meanings. Queerness in the film industry has been historically forced to work in the realm of subtext. Due to the Hays Code, a self-imposed set of restrictions made by the American film industry that banned films which, quote, lowered the moral standards of those who saw it, which is a fancy way of saying no sex, no violence, and no gays. When the Hays Code lasted from 1934 to 1968, the legacy of the Hays Code and its impact on queer representation in film can still be felt today. Explicit depictions of queerness were banned, but implicit or subtextual depictions of queerness, they're a different story altogether. This is where queer coding comes into place. Queer coding is where a character is written with attributes that are stereotypical or otherwise indicate queerness. While queer-coded characters still often were caught by higher-ups in the film world, they're still often presented as a way to fly under the radar, so to speak, especially if they're villains. I'd recommend checking out Overly Sarcastic Productions' video on queer-coded villains, which we have linked in the description down below, if you want to find out more about that specific trope. But the one act that is either always notably absent or extremely controversial whenever it occurs is, you guessed it, kissing. Kissing is the act where we lose all pretenses of plausible deniability that two characters are gay. You have a gay kiss in a film, and you risk the age rating being increased from PG to PG-13 by the MPAA, have a gay kiss in a video game, and gamers complain about forced diversity, and people complain about us shoving our queerness in their faces. Queer television creators often have to fight tooth and nail to even get one gay kiss. And even then, that comes with the expectation that 1, the kiss is between 2 women, hardly ever 2 men, and 2, it comes at the very end of the series or only occurs in the fucking comics. Yes, I am still mad about The Legend of Korra. But, as we've established, the heterosexual kiss isn't just common, it's almost jarring when it doesn't happen. What is it about queer kissing that makes it so objectionable and inflammatory? Well, homophobia, obviously, but it's deeper than that. First, we need to look at the inherently political nature of kissing, both for straight and gay couples. According to Charles E. Morris and John M. Sloop's essay, What These Lips Have Kissed, Refiguring the Politics of Queer Kissing, kissing is a performative act that, when done by a heterosexual couple, serves to reinforce and reaffirm heteronormativity. It is an act in which people are encouraged to reiterate expected social sexual dynamics, steer away from unexpected or unwelcome social sexual dynamics, and punish those who participate in such acts through social ostracism and other disciplinary means. This is what Morris and Sloop say is the reason that straight kissing is never actively scrutinized. Public kissing occurs so often between straight couples that we see it as being as normal as a handshake because it actively upholds the heteronormative status quo. Queer public kissing, by contrast, is seen as a direct violation of this upholding of heteronormativity. Queer kissing, especially man-on-man kissing, is almost symbolic of the fundamental threat queerness poses to cis heteronormativity. Not to suggest, of course, that lesbian kissing is normalized in society. It's still plenty stigmatized. The fact that lesbian kisses in shows like Legend of Korra and She-Ra are forced to be at the very conclusion of the story so that the normativity of the relationship is never given enough time to flourish is emblematic of the fact that lesbian kissing is still very much stigmatized. Quoting Sloop and Morris again, we would argue that representations of man-on-man kissing suffer stigma more severely and are perceived as a greater threat to heteronormativity. In part, we attribute this to the sexism that underwrites appropriations of women kissing. For example, the spectacle of Madonna kissing Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera at the 2003 MTV Music Awards suggests that a lesbian kiss fits comfortably, if contingently, within the heterosexual male gaze often containing it. Basically, lesbian kisses are only seen as more acceptable because sexist heterosexual men tend to fetishize lesbians and try to fit them more cleanly with their idea of heteronormativity. Art exists to both challenge and reaffirm societal norms. We live in a society in which kissing, a significantly political act, is not only normalized but expected from heterosexual couples as a way to affirm heteronormativity. We live in a society in which the kiss is the most significant way to assert and affirm a relationship. In a world where it feels weird for the male and female leads to not kiss at the end of the movie, queer kisses become the symbol we can use to normalize queerness and fight back against heteronormativity. It's why we need to fight tooth and nail to include queer kissing in our media, and why they refuse to let us have it. Because something as simple as a kiss can strike fear into the hearts of homophobes and affirm that queer people are real and normal. So, as frustrating as it is that we have to struggle so much to get something so small in our media, if you're watching this and you're queer, I hope you can take solace in the fact that something as small as a public kiss can still threaten the fragile structures of our oppression. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please don't hesitate to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, all of that. Me and my wife plan on uploading video essays surrounding queerness and pop culture to this channel, and I can't wait to show you all what I've got planned. Thank you so much for watching, and happy Pride Month.